We're going to start on time, not a second too early. First of all, I want to thank y'all for being here. I want to thank my neighbor to the north, Attorney General Bailey, for joining us, Nick Bronny, the SG, and all his staff, all the work that they've been doing on this. And I want to thank Amelia. You want to stand up here with us? That's fine. Amelia Ford, who goes to high school here in Arkansas, outside of Jonesboro, and really appreciate her being here. We are having this press conference today to announce that I, along with my colleague here and 4 other states, for a total of 6 states, I think is what we have now, filed suit in the Eastern District of Missouri challenging the rule change by the Biden administration to Title IX. And we have seen this coming for a while, and we've been considering what options we have to stop this rule. Now, just to provide some context, so this past weekend, there was a track meet, a Division III contest in New York, and you had a man who now identifies as a woman competing against women. Now, he, by all accounts, to be fair, was a middle-of-the-pack track athlete as a male. But now, in the track meets against women, he has set the Division III 400-meter record. It should be noted that the time that he ran would qualify as last place in the men's, but set a record in the women's. Now, that's in New York. And a lot of people might say, that's New York. It's not Arkansas. Some people say this is a solution in search of a problem. That's ridiculous. Usually those people sort of agree, and so that's their last, that's the last place they can go and not agree with us, is to just say, well, this is a solution looking for a problem. But let me say this, I've learned a couple things. Number one, everything that starts on the East and West Coast ends up here. And the Biden administration rule is going to make sure that this ends up here. Because this rule does not just apply in New York. This rule applies everywhere. The reality is the vast majority, I don't even think it's close. And I'm not talking in Arkansas. It could be 80% in Arkansas. But I think nationally, the vast majority of people think this whole thing is just nonsensical. They don't understand it. My wife asked me this morning, who's for this? And all of that is true, but none of that is a reason to file a legal suit. For a legal suit, it can't just be ridiculous, nonsensical, hard to believe, outrageous, what have you. There has to be a legal basis. So what's our legal basis for challenging this? Well, there are several. I think we could win on any. I think we will win on all. The first one is statutory construction. This is not a new law. It's been around for decades, and the meaning of the statute has been completely different. It has been about opening opportunities for women, not shutting them down. You know, we've seen this sort of administrative play by the Biden administration in another area. Just last week, 2 weeks ago, we were dealing with the law that protects pregnant women in their employment. And now that law is being interpreted to ensuring the right to abortion. Something similar is going on here. This law was put into place to protect the rights of women and to provide opportunities. So it is the interpretation of the Biden administration is completely inconsistent with the statute and the way it's been interpreted for decades. So there's statutory challenge. Then there's a constitutional challenge. There's a First Amendment challenge. You're compelling people to speak in a particular way or risk some sort of harassment charge if you don't call people exactly what they want to be called. You also have what I call the Schoolhouse Rock constitutional argument. I think more people could benefit by watching what we did in the 70s, where you learn the fundamentals of changing the law. There's a process for this. It is well articulated in the Constitution. It doesn't change because you're frustrated with Congress. It doesn't change because you can't get elected to Congress the people you want to change the law. It does not change based on any of that. The process is the same, and you got to follow it, and they're not following it. So there's a constitutional objection there. Then there's also the constitutional objection. It's called the major questions doctrine, which is related to this process argument. If it's a major question, it's got to go to Congress, not through the regulatory scheme. And then finally, the arbitrary and capricious standard that we often challenge administrative actions using. What does that mean? Well, it's arbitrary and capricious because it's been interpreted a particular way for a long, long, long time, and then all of a sudden it changes. Arbitrary and capricious. Also, there were numerous comments that laid out why there are problems with this rule change. They were ignored. Arbitrary and capricious. So, look, I don't think it takes a lot of explaining as to why everyday people think this is odd, think this is wrong, think this is outrageous. But now I've provided to you the legal basis, and I'd like to welcome General Bailey to come up and say a few words, and then we'll hear from Ms. Ford. Thank you.
First of all, let me thank General Griffin for his leadership on this important issue, for his partnership with Missouri and the coalition of states that we are both leading in this legal challenge to President Biden's attack on the equal rights of women. For a half decade, this federal statute has protected women's rights. President Biden is perverting the plain text of the statute in favor of a radical transgender ideology. He has no constitutional authority to do so. There is direct harm to not only the states, but the private plaintiffs involved. I'd like to point out, first and foremost, reiterate what General Griffin said. President Biden has no constitutional authority to rewrite statutes. The plain text of the statute speaks for itself, and there's been a well-settled meaning that the word discrimination based on sex means binary decision between male and female gender. President Biden's attempt to re-legislate that issue through the flick of a pen in an administrative rule is unconstitutional. His attempt to expand the concept of discrimination based on sex to include radical transgender ideology is a perversion of the plain meaning of the statute. We are going to fight back and put a stop to this attack on women's rights. As a father, as a husband, this is personal to me. And we're proud to have partnered with the state of Arkansas, General Griffin, and other like-minded state attorneys general. I also want to thank Ms. Amelia Ford for her courage in stepping up and joining us in this important fight. And I'd like to turn it over to her for remarks.
My name is Amelia Ford. I play varsity basketball at my high school in Brookland, Arkansas. First, I want to thank Attorneys General Griffin and Bailey for inviting me to speak here today and for all their work protecting young women like me. I know I speak on behalf of women across the country in expressing gratitude for your courage standing up for the true meaning of Title IX and equal opportunities for women. A few days ago, some officials in Washington, D.C. issued some rules forcing schools to let certain boys access girls' locker rooms and sports teams. Now, whenever a boy identifies as a girl, that boy can come into my locker room where I change. He can use the bathroom where I need privacy. He can even get placed into my hotel room with me overnight when my team travels. These same officials have also said that these boys must be allowed to compete against me on the basketball courts and even have the ability to take away my spot to play on these teams. That is not okay. You don't just become a girl by what you feel or by what you think. The government should not force us to disregard common sense and reality, especially not by using Title IX, a law meant to protect women's opportunities. I worked incredibly hard to compete on the varsity team and be the best I can be. I love sports, and I know the importance of having privacy in locker rooms, showers, and overnight trips. I don't want that taken away. I'm glad that I live in a state where there are laws that protect women's sports and women's only spaces. But the new rules threaten our state laws. So, I'm joining a lawsuit to ask a court to step in and stop these new changes. I don't want any girl to lose her right to a fair playing field or her right to use a safe place to change. I'm so grateful for those standing against this rule today, and I hope many more will stand up with us because we matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy. Okay, now we'll take some questions. Yes, sir.
Generally, I got two questions. One, from my understanding, the Title IX rules don't specifically mention athletics, so why focus on that in this lawsuit? And secondly, several other states have filed similar lawsuits in other states or federal courts. What's different about this one, or is just the goal hoping that one of these circuits will end up striking down the rules or blocking them?
Well, I think the athletics is a natural outflow. We've already seen it. I gave you an example. You don't have to look long and you don't have to look hard to see that this is already impacting people. And this rule change is a welcome mat for more of that unacceptable behavior. This is going to increase it. And so we had no choice but to do this. Now you ask, why are we filing it? I take an oath here in Arkansas. And I support whatever other states are doing. And a lot of those are my colleagues. I support what they're doing. We wanted to make our own arguments here. I don't want to get too technical, but we're in the 8th Circuit, and I believe all of our states who joined are in the 8th Circuit, so which is the way the federal courts draw the lines geographically. But look, I think that I wanted to do this. We talked to colleagues to see who wanted to join us, and all of the ones that joined us are in our federal circuit. If you're asking, was there some grand conference call where all the AGs got on and decided who would do what? No. Not that I know of. This is something that a lot of us feel strongly about. And I think the reality is so many people feel strongly about it. Many wanted to do their own thing on this one, in contrast to what you often see where there's one suit nationally on a particular issue. I think that is a reflection. I think the multiple suits is a reflection of the passion on this issue.
Are the arguments all the same in these, or is there something?
I haven't read all the others. I know that ours are fabulous. I want to thank our SG again, and thank you to General Bailey's staff. I could tell you that we're going to win this suit.
Are there any examples yet that this has happened in Arkansas? And I guess a question for you too. Do you have thoughts that this is going to be happening in your school, or do we know for sure that it's going to happen?
So she's not going to take questions today, if that's okay. But I think if we have no obligation to sit around and wait until the examples pile up. The idea that this isn't going to happen here because it hadn't happened yet, I don't buy it, and I don't think anybody else buys it. So I love the timing of this. I think we're moving quickly, and we're trying to preempt, and hopefully we can get this stopped before it starts.
Do you see the suit as being harmful to transgender students?
No, I see it as following the law. If you want to change the law, there's a process for that, as outlined on Schoolhouse Rock, and it's on YouTube. You got to go through Congress. Thank you all.
Happy to take any questions if anybody has any. I would point out too that, in the state of Missouri, we have the Save Women's Sports Act. So just like Ms. Ford pointed out, the Title IX rule promulgated by the Biden administration attempts to nullify state statute. We currently are enforcing state statute to protect women's sports, and that's why the athletics competitions is central to some of the things we're talking about here today.
Can I ask you the same question? Is this a
Let me just say this. We have the same protections, and want to thank Senator Missy Irvin for her leadership on that. We have similar protections at the state level.
Can I ask you the same question then that I asked him? Is this something that has happened in Missouri, or something that is happening, or is it more of a prevent?
So this absolutely was happening prior to our General Assembly, the people's elected representatives enacting legislative protections. We're not going to let the Biden administration undo those protections because we've seen the harm that occurred before that legislation was passed.
And they couldn't happen here prior to this because we have a state law in place.
Generals, Josh Snyder with the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. And I apologize, this question's actually going to be for both of you. Athletics is a part of, well, it might be a part of these provisions. And like you said, it's maybe coming down the road. But there are also lots of other sections that address things. And given, Arkansas, and I bet probably in Missouri too, there have been other laws that address things like referring to people by their pronouns or restricting bathroom access to folks that match the sex. And I apologize, I'm still waking up for the day. But does your lawsuit focus mainly on athletics, or does it also cover some of these other things?
The entire Title IX rule and all of its pernicious impacts. We attack those portions of the rule that change well-settled statute that was enacted by Congress in Biden's attempt to undermine the rule of law. We attack those portions that are unconstitutional. We attack those portions that seek to nullify state law. So the complaint speaks for itself, but it goes beyond just athletics.
And the First Amendment not only protects speech, but it protects us from having to say certain things. Can't compel certain speech. Now, why would that be an issue here? Because if you determine that calling someone by a pronoun other than their born gender is harassment, then you are being compelled to call them whatever that they require you to call them, and that's inconsistent with their gender, and you could be accused of harassment as a result of that. So the First Amendment's at issue here. That's not just an athletics thing. So we've obviously had examples of athletics. They're the most common, I think, if you in the community conversation, but this applies more broadly.
And to follow up on Samantha's question with regard to that, have you heard rumblings or complaints from folks about just such harassment where you think that if Title IX, as it is now, comes into effect on August 1st, that people will start filing suit in Arkansas along these lines?
Well, first of all, it's a normal outflow. There's not one area of the law where we would say, let's wait till someone dies from fentanyl before we pass the law. You don't just sit around and wait for the harmful effects to occur. They're easily predictable. And again, to General Bailey's point, we already have a law on the books as it relates to, well, we have several laws that relate to this either directly or tangentially, but we have a law on athletics. And so the reason you're not seeing this problem in Arkansas heretofore, it's illegal under state law. This would change that.
Okay. AG?
Yep.
How can you protect students or families if they decide to stand up and get kicked off a team? What can you do?
Well, I think it depends on the specific factual circumstances. I think step one is letting state law predominate, which means challenging this law.
Yeah, I would reiterate. I mean, we are seeking to put a stay on the enforcement of the federal rule. And so that's how we protect the women and girls.
General Griffin, I want to ask you, the governor last week issued an executive order saying that, and said the state won't comply with these regulations. How does this affect that lawsuit legally? Do you think that's a smart move for the state to make the declaration like that?
Look, I think this lawsuit is directly related to all of what the governor talked about, but it is it's something that we've been working on for some time, and I think ultimately the best thing we can do for the governor and the people of the state of Arkansas is to get the Biden administration rule change stayed, and then our law will continue to predominate.
Were you working on this before she issued the order?
We've been working on this for some time. Thank y'all.